I am going through all of the perks, ammo mods, and field upgrades, testing every base item with all 6 augments to figure out which ones are working, not working, which are the best options for you for whatever type of gameplay that you're looking for. And the first stop on our journey is DEADSHOT DAIQUIRI. Today's video, we're gonna learn why Dead First does not actually deal double critical damage sometimes, and why Dead Set is probably the best option for a lot of the speedrunners who are grinding right now. Also, how much of a chance do you have at getting return bullets using Dead Against critical hit augment? If you've done your own kind of stats and testing, I'd love to hear some of your feedback. But with that, guys, all of the stats and analytics that I have is currently available on our website, theroyalfamily.com. It is going to be in the comment section down below, where you can be able to access our entire Zombies Information Hub. On the Zombies Information Hub, we have everything from in-depth about weapons, attachments, perks, ammo mods, bit upgrades, gobble gums, different packs and loadout packs that we kind of use that are some of the best options. As we continue on in our journey to deep dive testing everything about Black Ops 6 Zombies, you can be sure that all of the information will be updated there. With that, guys, let's get right into the video. So before we dive deep into the video, I want to give a quick disclaimer. While testing these weapons with these perks, there are some slightly different decimal points that I can't necessarily predict for. And so some of the numbers versus in game are going to be maybe off by about maybe 1 to 3 points. If there was anything that was above 6, I made sure I just did a deeper dive test into it or found a different weapon in order to test these things. And so let's get right into DEADSHOT DAIQUIRI. So DEADSHOT DAIQUIRI as a base perk, enemy down sight moves to enemy critical location, increase critical damage to enemies. Well, obviously I want to test exactly what that critical damage is. And so the critical damage bonus is 10% to all upgrades and Pack-a-Punch tiers. That is true. However, there are some issues. This needs to be fixed across the board for weapons because not all weapons seem to have that same exact 10% boost. For instance, assault rifles don't. Now, just to kind of give you an example here, you see here that as a base perk, there is 10% critical damage increase to all weapons. Just as an example, I have the Sarkov 762 here. You can see on the right side, all of the actual damage values as you Pack-a-Punch or upgrade the weapon. Versus once you add DEADSHOT to the Sarkov, that base no Pack-a-Punch common tier rarity is 337 points versus a 307 damage points itself, all the way up to about 10,789 points right there, which is really great. Obviously, that it just adds that in. For those of you who kind of want to understand how to figure out what the damage is itself and to figure out like the upgrades whenever you're trying to do your own testing, if you take the new damage minus the old damage equals 30, and then you divide that by the old damage, that tells you right about what that damage increase percentage is. And in this case, you can multiply that by 100 if you're not able to yourself, but you multiply that by 100 and that will tell you what that percentage is. So it's about a 9.77% increase. And again, like I said before, there's a lot of extra decimal points, and for points behind the actual damage values that we can't really know because of what it shows on screen. So this we can estimate at probably being around 10%. And so from some of those inconsistencies, you can see that when it comes to weapons like the Krieg C, or notably in all assault rifles, there is some inconsistencies where the actual damage increase that you get for the assault rifles is about 9.5% for any non-Pack-a-Punch upgrades, meaning that before you do any Pack-a-Punch, if you just use your scrap to grind and level up your weapon, then it only gets a 9.5% boost. However, once you Pack-a-Punch, instead of getting a 10% critical increase, you actually get 17.42% increase to your critical damage. And that's just for assault rifles. Now, I've kind of tested a lot of the different weapon classes, but if you guys end up finding something different, let me know. I'd love to be able to see that. I think it's also because the assault rifles were so busted at launch, and I think that Treyarch is trying to fix them. But we're going to see a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to assault rifles versus the rest of the weapon classes throughout the rest of the video with DEADSHOT. I'm not sure if this is something that was intentional or something that they just kind of overlooked while trying to fix up the weapon damage. But I will do some more tests on this in a couple of months, probably once they've leveled out where the assault rifles should be at. So now that we finished talking about the base perk for Deadshot, let's go ahead and start breaking down in depth some of these augment perks as well. So for instance, Dead Break, it increases damage to armor pieces. So the one thing about Dead Break is that it just reduces the shots to break armor. You can't actually see any additional damage. So it's only reducing the shots, meaning that if you're doing 7% damage, like in the case of a light armor zombie around 9, if you're doing, if it took you 8 shots to break the armor without Deadshot, once you add Deadshot, it'll take you 5 shots to break. So your damage isn't actually being increased as stated, it's only just reducing those shots to break that armor. So if you're ever confused, like I'm doing the same amount of damage, I'm not doing additional damage, well, don't worry. It's just that on screen, visually, you don't see any increase of damage on that, but you're just taking less shots to break. For instance, on round 10, if it were to take 8 shots still without Deadshot, it'll take you only 4 shots. I hope that makes a lot of sense to you guys. I hope that's very clear. It's a very simple perk. I think this is a very effective perk in the earlier rounds, but probably not as much because you cannot manipulate and increase the actual damage itself. It's just cutting down some of the shots that it takes. Up next, we've got Deadhead, which further increases critical damage. So what this does, as you can see here, it increases the critical damage bonus. Now, this is supposed to do an increase of 15% on all upgrades and Pack-a-Punch tiers. So as you can see here, the Sarkov 762 does, when max Pack-a-Punch and max upgraded, over 900 to 800 critical damage. But with that 15% boost with Deadhead on, it does 11,316. So with this, I want to make sure that you understand that it is not 15% added to the Deadshot 10%. It's just literally 55% added on top of the Deadshot, but to your base instead of actually Deadshot. So with this, I think this is a highly slept on augment. I don't see as many people talking about this because ultimately this perk itself can get you sometimes even longer duration than Dead First can, especially whenever you get higher in those rounds. We're going to talk about that here shortly once we get to Dead First. However, with this perk also, you can see here that some other weapons like the SOG, and so some of these SMGs and ARs, they're not actually working properly with this augment. So there are some weapons that are getting about a 15% increase when it comes to the, once again, Pack-a-Punch upgrades, and then over a 22 or 23% increase for the upgrades when it comes to Pack-a-Punch. Now, I think this might also be just a kind of offset for the small damage on like some of those assault rifle shots or those SMG shots. However, this is not necessarily reliable because not every weapon is getting these in the same class is getting the same exact treatment. For instance, some of the SMGs get a 22% bonus while some of them get a 23%, versus like the assault rifles that sometimes need to get more than that, or some of them get a 16% bonus. So it's something that we can't necessarily rely on when it comes to Deadshot. Once again, Deadshot right now is just kind of completely inconsistent across the board, and it should probably fix that. Now, the very next perk I want to talk about is Dead Draw, which just simply reduces your hipfire spread. So the question is exactly how much does it reduce your hipfire spread, and like what does that actually look like? So first, I just want to briefly talk about like what hipfire spread is and why minimum and maximum matter. So when it comes to minimum hipfire spread, that is where you take a shot. And minimum hipfire spread is huge because when you take that first shot or those first few shots, let's say you're burst firing and you have a semi-auto weapon, if you're doing hipfire, that just means that bullet is going to go pretty much directly where you want it to go. But the better the minimum hipfire, that's just kind of those initial shots. Where maximum hipfire comes into play is when you're taking when you're shooting for much longer, or you've got one of those full auto weapons. That's where maximum hipfire matters, because the more that your hipfire spread is wide, obviously those bullets going to go everywhere else. So a lot of times you want to shrink that. Minimum hipfire is going to really matter for a lot of those semi-auto weapons, things like your marksman rifles sometimes, or your burst fire weapons, versus maximum hipfire is going to really matter when it comes to that full auto weapons where you're going to be shooting a lot, or maybe you've got a burst fire weapon that you just pull the trigger down and just continues to shoot. That's where max hipfire is going to go. And so I want to talk about the max hipfire because that's specifically what Dead Draw as an augment does for your Deadshot, for your hipfire. So when it comes to your maximum hipfire spread, it reduces your spread by 25%. So as you can see here in the graphic, without Deadshot, whether you Pack-a-Punch or not, your hip fire spread on a weapon like the XM4 is just the same. However, once you add Dead Draw on, whether it's Pack-a-Punch or Unpack, it reduces it by about 25%. Up next, we've got Dead First. And Dead First is probably the most broken of all of these perks itself. And by broken, I mean like actually like does not work properly, but it also does sometimes a crap ton of more damage than expected. So super easy. I'm just gonna say if you're using a weapon that's not an assault rifle, you're gonna just get double the critical damage on that first hit, right? Deal double critical damage if an enemy is at full health. So if an enemy is at full health, anytime you get a first hit on it for that critical spot, you're going to get double the damage. Now, as you can see here, that's super simple. The only thing is, it's not doing double the DEADSHOT bonus. So it's not doing, you get that 10% base perk damage boost and then double that. It's actually only double from the base damage, which I think is a little bit confusing. And I feel like because of the balance of the game, and you guys can watch one of my videos on how to actually counterfix weapon balancing. But because of the balancing of the game, I think truly they should give you that DEADSHOT bonus of 10% and then do double the base, or then do double the bonus of what it is after that increase. I think that'll just make the games, the weapons much more viable in the future. I know a suggestion. If you guys want to hear more suggestions about that, definitely check out this video that I'm going to put right here up in the little top right there. You guys can watch that video. I'll also have it linked out below as well. Assault rifles are slightly different where the first upgrades on Pack-a-Punch, so going up to uncommon, blue rarity, purple, and gold, that actually does double the base bonus of the weapon. However, once you Pack-a-Punch, you get a flat damage boost number of 300, 450, so on and so forth. You can see here, instead of getting double the base damage for critical hits. And then once you get to pack level 2 is where it gets even more weird. And instead of you getting double what it was in the base damage, you're actually getting double what the damage is after the Dead First bonus is applied to pack 1. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that you Pack-a-Punch the Crig C here, and you've got your base damage, your base headshot damage. You can see here in the first row that the headshot damage chart for without any perks is 132. But once you come down here to Dead First, you can see here that it's 264 with Dead First if you do that double base bonus, which obviously 132 times 2 is 264. And it's the same across the board for all of the non-Pack-a-Punch upgrades. However, next you can see that from where it was with the bonus, there is 300 critical damage points added to the base with the bonus from Dead First, and then 450, and then 600, and then so on and so forth. And from there, the damage is not based on the base damage, meaning that, for instance, for Pack-a-Punch level 2, common rarity, if this augment worked the way it's supposed to, 396 times 2 would mean that you would get 792 damage for critical hits with this if it was a first hit, but instead you're actually getting 1128. And so that's a significant boost from just times 2. So what is that? 564 from the level 1 Pack-a-Punch multiplied by 2 gets you the actual damage for pack 2. And then once again, the damage for pack 3. And so when it comes to Dead First for assault rifles, and I think it's just kind of once again to offset the weakness of the assault rifles, this is not true for SMGs. I think that they wanted to provide a better bonus for the assault rifles so it can be much more viable. When we break this down, 4224 is the max damage that this is able to do, times 2. 8448 is what you could maximally get if this Dead First augment worked the way it should on the ARs. But instead, you're getting 9024 damage for those assault rifles max whenever you get that first hit. And so This is probably one of the ones that's most broken because it doesn't work the way it should, but it also is lending itself to be more overpowered for us when it comes to assault rifles. Now, if they do correct the assault rifles for dead first, then that means the assault rifles will feel much weaker. So I'm kind of okay with how they did this. When I was testing this against some of the other weapons, this actually does not work. This makes dead first a less viable option for some of the other weapons, specifically because of this bonus of 300, 450, this basic bonus added or applied. That dramatically changes a lot of the damage to critical hit multipliers for the rest of the weapons. So this works for the assault rifles, but this doesn't necessarily work for all of the other weapons when you do it in that manner. For dead first, I will make sure I let you guys know if there's any other inconsistencies I find for each of those weapons, especially when it comes to dead first, because I think dead first is a very overly used perk because sometimes it just sounds really great. However, this is where I want to briefly talk about why dead first isn't always the best option. So if you are using dead first and you do not get a critical hit bonus for using dead first, if it's the first hit, then it drops your critical hit damage down to that 10% base bonus perk. And because it drops it down to that 10% bonus, you are missing out severely on a lot of critical hit damage. And where this starts to actually matter is when all of those armored zombies start to come in play. If you hit an armored zombie, that drops their health down, meaning that even if you crack their armor and then you get a first actual critical hit on their flesh, this dead first does not apply. So you're only going to get the base critical damage. And so what that means is that a lot of times once you reach that round 15 to 19, where you start to get some heavy armor zombies and a lot more of those light armor zombies, dead first is pretty much inactive for a good majority of those enemies. And then as you start to get into round 30, when pretty much half of the enemies are armored, then it definitely doesn't work for like half the time. And so you're losing a lot of that bonus where you could be potentially getting that 15% increase. And if you're using assault rifles or you're using SMGs, dead head will step in and will really act really well to get a lot of that extra bonus, especially if you're getting some of that 16, 23% bonus instead of just the 10% because you can't get those critical hits. I hope that makes a lot of sense. Because of that, dead first, if you know you're going past round 20, is probably not the best option. Or for right now, unless they patch it, you can save and quit, change from dead first to dead head, go back into the game, and then dead head is going to get you much further along because you're going to still continue to get a lot more critical damage done to those enemies the higher rounds that you go. There are some cases where dead first is going to be fantastic, and that's for those semi-auto, very strong weapons like the SVD, like your snipers, or maybe even some of those marksman rifles, the semi-auto ones that are not burst fire. Things like that are going to do you amazingly with dead first because it could potentially push your one-shot kill from, round 26 all the way up to like round 30, 34, something like that. And I'm also going to have those specific testing details and those weapon breakdowns for you guys as well. I hope all of that makes sense of why dead first is kind of broken, underpowered, but also overpowered at the same time. And why I'm not sure if I necessarily want them to fix the inconsistency or the imbalance with dead first when it comes to the ARs because it will significantly reduce the critical hit damage. Up next, we've got Dead Set. Now, Dead Set is probably one of the coolest Deadshot perks or augments that we have because it reduces the gun movement while performing advanced movement. And so what is that advanced movement? The advanced movement includes things from jumping or diving, running around, doing all types of things. So what I do want to show you is when you're doing some of that advanced movement, what does your weapon actually look like? And so I've got a couple of examples here for you guys. Now here in this testing video, notice how with Deadshot, your weapon moves a lot less and your maximum hipfire spread also is significantly reduced as well. So it is significantly changed. But notice also how quickly I recover, and I'm kind of spamming jump to see just how quickly you can move. And you can significantly jump and recover much faster with having a Deadshot perk on. I'm not sure if this was something that's intended, or maybe there was some other kind of other weird things that was going on. You guys let me know in the comment section down below if you've also experienced the same thing where you have a delay in between without having a DEADSHOT on. But I do believe that because of that weapon having to recover, you can recover faster and jump again if you have DEADSHOT on. Now up next, I want to show you what mag chilling looks like without DEADSHOT and then with DEADSHOT on it. So first off, you can see the green circle is kind of where the hip fire all the way down to recovery, the max hip fire to recovery is changed. But once you move over to with DEADSHOT, you can see a significant difference. Now, one of the biggest things I want to point out of the difference between with DEADSHOT and without DEADSHOT, because it could be really difficult to see without them being side by side, is that you actually get earlier recovery than you do without DEADSHOT. So I'm going to play it back again. Look at with DEADSHOT and how early you recover when you're maxing. Versus without DEADSHOT, it takes a while to recover. You're almost fully out of that mantle before you start to recover. Now, I want to play that again, but this time I want you to notice with DEADSHOT and without DEADSHOT side by side, just how early they start to recover. I want to play it a second time, and I want you to notice the difference in each of these mantles. I'm going to play these mantles side by side. Notice just how much the weapon moves, and how without DEADSHOT, your weapon almost goes completely out of screen versus with DEADSHOT. And so the really cool thing about this is your weapon stays almost up the entire time. And just to give you some specific stats, there is almost no hip fire penalty during the mantle with hip fire on, and you recover much sooner. Now, the last little bit I want to show you is what it looks like when you dive. So you can see here without DEADSHOT, you go from about 379% down to about 365%, just as you kind of start to lunge out for that jump. And then once you get down to prone, which is just where you lay down, that penalty is at about 350%. And then once you finally recover as your body stops moving, your hip fire actually gets down to about 85%. So obviously once you're prone, your hip fire accuracy is much tighter and much better. So that's why it gets down to about 85%. However, with DEADSHOT, and you can see stacked on top of each other, the difference is that when you start to jump, you get a much smaller max hip fire range, and it actually is severely overpowered. Here's what it looks like in slow motion. You can be able to see just how small of a hip fire spread you actually have. And you even get so far down to about 75% of that maximum spread. So Dead Set is completely overpowered when it comes to movement and zombies. And this is crazy because it's something I don't hear anybody talking about. You can jump much faster from your recoveries. When you're mentally, you can actually shoot much faster. And when you're diving, trying to get across areas or jump across rails to be able to move, you can recover your weapon much faster and with much more accuracy if you need to get right into another gunfight with a zombie. I guess zombies aren't gunfighting. Up next, we got Dead Again. Dead Again has critical hits, have a chance of adding bullets to your magazine. Now, I've already kind of covered Dead Again in one of my previous videos where I talked about how to get infinite ammo with things like your shotguns or your snipers and maybe even some marksman rifles. But I want to break it down once again in a quick, easy way for you guys to understand. If you want to watch the video, I'll link it right up here as well. The Marine SP versus the Grakova. The Marine SP shotgun versus the Grakova pistol is a fully automatic pistol that shoots like crazy. And so here you can see that on average, there's about a 50% chance of critical hits returning a bullet to your magazine. Now, from there, you also have a chance of getting more than just one bullet returning. You might get 2 bullets returned or even 3 bullets returning when it comes to the shotguns, or really all of them. But that's what that multiple hit chance is. So you have a almost 50% chance of multiple bullets returning during each pop, which just means that you might get 2 per pop or 3 per pop. Because of that, every 5 seconds on average with the Marine SP shotgun or shotguns in general, you're getting about 7.5 bullets back into your magazine every 5 seconds. This is overpowered because you're only shooting an average of about 6 bullets every 5 seconds. So because you have the chance to have 7.5 bullets returned every 5 seconds, that's 1.5 more bullets per 5 seconds than you're even shooting, making this completely overpowered for shotguns, for some marksman rifles, and then also for snipers. However, where this falls is like for things like that are fully automatic, have a much lower critical hit chance, like the Cobra assault rifles, SMGs, where you might only get an average of about 5 to 7 bullets returned for like the Cobra pistol when you're shooting out 62 bullets in 5 seconds. So it's not as overpowered and strong for something like the Cobra. I hope that makes a lot of sense for you guys. All right, guys, so that is all of the details and information I could do for testing on DEADSHOT. The only thing that I didn't get the chance to test is the range or how far you need to be away from a zombie's head in order to get the base DEADSHOT to snap onto an enemy's critical location. If you guys would like me to be able to test that, I'll test that for you guys and I'll put it in another video. With all of that being said, there was a lot of information and stats that we tested. If you guys have any other questions about what you would like for me to test with DEADSHOT DAIQUIRI, make sure to put that in this video comment section down here. But also, upcoming, I'm probably going to be testing Speed Cola next, as I've already got a handful of stats about Speed Cola. So I'd love to know, after Speed Cola, what's some of like the most popular perks or emblem mods or even field upgrades that you guys would like me to do an in-depth test for? I would love to be able to, do whatever is most popular for you guys before I start the journey of testing and breaking down all of the weapons for zombies and how those are all pack-a-punch tested versus upgrades, what significant features, what in-depth stats, all of that kind of stuff. This is what we do here on the channel. And if you guys like this video, make sure to watch this video where I break down specifically how Treyarch should fix the weapon balancing here in Black Ops 6 Zombies. There's a major issue right now, and I have a pretty genius idea that I think Treyarch should listen to. I'll see you guys in this video. Have a beautiful goddamn day. Bye, guys.